success does not feel like I thought it would. Definitely feels different, as in I expected it to feel like achieving a goal, feel like crossing something off my bucket list. You know, when you have that like celebratory feeling, when you like graduate high school and you just like feel this huge like badge of achievement, which this is so funny that I actually just brought up the high school graduation piece of it, because actually when I graduated college, I had this exact same feeling that I feel as I kind of cross off these milestones in my life. And it's it's funny because I graduated college in 3 years with 2 majors in marketing and entrepreneurship. And when I graduated, it was during COVID. And so I didn't get to walk. I didn't get like a graduation ceremony. It literally was me sitting in the basement with my family, and my like literally they showed me on the screen and my family went, woo. And like just my direct family, because it was COVID. So it was like my brother, my mom, my dad. Literally at the time, my boyfriend didn't even stay for my graduation, which is a topic for another time. But it felt like I went through all of this work and didn't really get to like celebrate. And that was really rough for me. And as I go through a lot of milestones in my life, it just feels different to kind of cross those things off than I thought it would. Growing up as a kid, you know, you see people celebrate milestones like getting a promotion on TV, and it's this huge deal. Like they just won the lottery almost. And when I was growing up, if my mom or my dad got a promotion, like we would celebrate. We'd go out to dinner. We'd be so excited, congratulate them. And when I started to get promotions, it didn't feel like that. You know, it just didn't feel like celebratory. It didn't feel like going through it. And I think with my current job, the reason it didn't feel that way is because I was already doing the job. And one thing that I am absolutely terrible about is I never grew out of playing pretend. And I think a lot of us are guilty of this, but when we're kids, we play pretend. You know, you play house, you play work. And I am personally terrible about, if I set my mind to something and I say, okay, I'm going to get this promotion, I have XYZ in mind, right? I imagine that I'll be able to pay off this and go on this trip and spend this, or I'll have this much free time and I will get to talk to this person differently and I will get to manage this. And it never really happens that way. So I'm playing pretend and I'm setting my expectations really, really high just to be disappointed in the end. But one thing my therapist specifically tells me is I am terrible about thinking in scarcity. So this is something I've been kind of changing my mindset over the past few months, but I think in scarcity in a lot of aspects, not specifically in my career, but when it comes to like relationships, job titles, things like that, I don't think it's going to happen, right? I set my bar not low. I set my bar really high, but I expect it to come in much lower because that's kind of how things have worked out to date. And I think that my therapist specifically is like, why are you always thinking this way? Like, you have to think in abundance. But moral of the story is I set these really high expectations, and is it unhealthy? Possibly. But if I set my expectations high, I think one thing that I've learned over the past few years of my life throughout my 20s is there are like milestones that when I have this like fantasy, I'm skipping, right? But in real life, I know that I have to achieve those milestones before. I don't know if anybody's read Traction. It's a kind of like operational book, but when you're building a company, it practically lays out, you have your 10-year goal, your 5-year goal, your 3-year goal. Under that, you have your rocks, which are like your yearly goals or your company goals. And under those rocks, you have pebbles, which are like little milestones or things that need to be achieved in order to complete that big rock. And I believe that comes down to life as well, because even though you want that big promotion or that big salary, you have to cross off X, Y, Z in order to do that. And a lot of the times when you cross off X, you're like, okay, I'm expecting the full rock to be complete, and it's not. And it feels really, really disappointing, because it feels like your goalpost is moving, because every goal that you hit, you're creating new goals. And I'm terrible about this. I set a goal to hit 6 figures, and then immediately, like literally when I hit 6 figures, I was like, okay, when am I going to hit 200K? Like, what? Like, immediately setting a new goal. And I do it with my current like efforts in life. I'm currently trying to increase my brand, my personal brand, both on like social media and my podcast. And with that, I set a goal because I realized like, okay, my TikToks are not getting the views that I want them to get. They're getting stuck in like the 300s land, which anybody that posts on TikTok, like, it's the worst. But I posted a video and I got like 11,000 or 12,000 views. And I was disappointed because I got hate on that. And so I immediately set a new goal of like, okay, it was hate from men, crazy. But I was like, okay, I don't want to target men now. My new goal is to like switch my content so that it's only targeting women, or like mainly targeting women. So I think moral of the story, like once you have one goal that you achieve, you're like, okay, on to the next. And people are terrible about that. And like once you hit that goal, once you get that promotion, once you get the XYZ, it doesn't automatically make you confident. You're running into another issue or another discouragement, or you're telling yourself you're not good enough at this either, or you're trying to analyze how you can be better at this or this or this. And it just becomes really exhausting loop. But eventually you'll hit that goal, right? If you keep checking off milestones, you keep increasing your goals, at some point you're going to hit like the overall goal. And I think a lot of the times what we don't do is take a step back and be like, wow, I'm living in my goals that I had 5 years ago, because we keep moving that goalpost, you know? When I graduated high school, my goal was to move to Florida someday. I literally was on my high school trip in Miami, and I told my parents, I was like, I'm going to move to Florida. Like, I have to move to Florida. And now I'm 3 years into living in Florida, and there's still times that it hits me, and I'm just like, I literally will like smile at the sun or smile at a palm tree, and I'm just like, wow, like this is really my life. And it does. It feels almost surreal. It's amazing to have one of those moments where you really take a step back and you're like, I'm living in my dream from 5 years ago. But that being said, now I have new dreams, because people don't stop dreaming. I think another thing that people run into as they mark off their goals and they cross off their bucket list and they start becoming what we quote unquote define as successful, so we start comparing ourselves a lot more. And not in the aspect of like, this is where I fall short, so I'm going to beat myself up and feel insecure about it. More in the aspect of, what am I doing that I can improve? And this is something that I personally run into in practically every aspect of my life. And am I guilty of the ones that make me feel insecure? Absolutely. Especially, I will say, with the side of me that's looking to build my brand and content specifically. On social media, it's definitely difficult. I recently was talking to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT was like, I think you're focusing on the wrong thing, right? You're comparing your nose to this girl's nose, or how you do your makeup to this girl's makeup. And you should be building your brand on your personality, not what you look like. And so you're comparing the wrong thing. And it was interesting for me to have a huge hit on like a light bulb go off from ChatGPT, but it was like, wow, I am comparing the wrong thing. What am I comparing what I look like when I'm not trying to be a beauty influencer? I'm not trying to be a bikini model. So why am I comparing myself to this girl? And that was something that was the downside of comparing yourself. But where I think comparison can be helpful is if you work for a company where you're trying to win clients and sales, or if you're trying to, I don't know, if you're trying to win a client for your business. When you lose a client, you don't look at that and go, all right, on to the next, right? A lot of the times in good salespeople and good entrepreneurs and business owners, they're going to look at that and go, okay, where did we fall short? And if I fell short in an area where I can't win, how do I sell against that? What is my competitive advantage versus their competitive advantage? And how do I reach the right clientele? And I think this is the same for content creation as well, as I've gotten more into it, because if I didn't perform well, right, and this person did, it's not necessarily a comparison of this versus that, right? When I was comparing the way I did my makeup versus the way she did her makeup to see who looks prettier, that was the wrong thing, because I wasn't trying to be a beauty influencer, right? So when you look at those, you say, okay, what's my competitive advantage? Oh, I need to find my niche. This is not my niche. Her niche is not my niche. And so there's aspects where comparison can be extremely helpful, where it can be extremely discouraging. And I think this is specific to career-wise. A lot of the times in a career, you will run into, well, this person has more experience. I hate this. I could literally make an entire podcast about experience and being young, trying to be successful, grow a career, build experiences. In 1 Timothy, it does talk about how you should not let being young discourage you or let people look down on you because you are young. And specifically, it's talking about being a disciple. But one thing that I have noticed is a lot of the times in both my career and in life in general, people have said, well, you're young. And that's a reason that I've been limited, right? Like that's a barrier for me or a roadblock for me because I'm young. And specifically when it comes to like careers, I get frustrated with this in corporate jobs because if somebody has been doing something for 14, 15 years, they are looked as more expert than somebody that's been doing it for 5 years because of the amount of years they've been doing it. But hear me out. If somebody goes in, clocks in, does what they're supposed to do for 15 years and just does enough to get their yearly raises versus somebody goes in there for 5 years and raises their hand for every extra project, stays later, puts in the extra hours, skips a lunch, they're getting just as much experience as that person with 15 years because they're putting in the reps. This comes down to the same thing in sports, right? This is a great comparison, and I should honestly use this in my next promotion meeting. But when you're in sports, and let's say you're a freshman in high school, and you're trying to win the varsity team, and there's a senior that goes to practice, shows up for practice every day, but the freshman is putting in the extra hours, first person in the gym, last person out of the gym, first person on the field, last person off the field, going in early in the morning to get extra reps, staying late to get extra reps. That person's going to eventually outperform that senior because they're getting the extra reps. So that's the same thing in every aspect of life. And I get so frustrated with corporate organizations that don't understand this. If somebody's putting in the reps, they're more expert than somebody that's just doing the bare minimum, but has been doing the bare minimum for longer. And that's one thing I think in the corporate and the business world is so misunderstood. And that's why me personally, I think that it's really difficult for people with sports or athletic backgrounds to go into the corporate world because honestly, you're playing different rules. Like it's literally a legacy game, versus a talent and dedication game. Like whoever's performing best does not always get the recognition. And a lot of the times the people that have been there 10, 15, 20 years, they're the ones taking credit for the stuff that the younger people are doing. And it makes it super difficult to like be successful in a corporate career when you're young, because then at that point you start to get frustrated and you're like, screw it, I'm just going to start my own business. And that's how a lot of these companies lose young talent and end up with average performing years and their growth rate drops. One thing I'm personally absolutely terrible about is I used to be absolutely terrible about just wanting to get there, right? I just want to hit this goal. I need to get to this goal. I need to get this crossed off my list so that I can get on to the next goal and the next milestone. And I can do X, Y, Z to get A, B, C. And I think that's what ultimately led to a lot of like the disappointments I felt in my early career. Like my last promotion about 6 months ago, that was a pretty rough one. Like I remember being like, wow, that sucked. I got off the meeting with my CEO where he told me I got the promotion, and I was like, all right. Like I literally, like that was my demeanor. I was like, okay. I got off the call. I didn't even tell my family. Like it was just, it is what it is. Because I was already doing the job. The raise was kind of bum. Like it was terrible. And then on top of it, I was like, they're just limiting me because of my experience. What I didn't realize at the time was this new position that I was in. I was building a whole new line of business. I was building new skills, meeting new people, building out a really solid network. And so over the past like few months, I have kind of slowed down and started to try and enjoy the actual journey to that milestone, and not necessarily enjoy it because there are a lot of things at my job that I just want to like absolutely rage quit. I don't enjoy all of it. But looking back on the past 6 months, I do appreciate the learnings. I do enjoy the things that I'm learning, the people I'm meeting, the opportunities that I'm building for my future. And I think a lot of the times we get upset when we're not allowed to skip steps, or there's a blocker where we have to take one step at a time. And rather than trying to rush to the next opportunity, I think for me over the past few months, I've started to try and appreciate the things that I'm learning and the experiences that I'm gathering that God's allowing me to go throughout these times. So even though I want to jump to the next position, it's been very fruitful for me to be in the current position that I'm in, build the relationships that I've built, and not taken opportunities that I was offered very early on in the into moving into this role. I was headhunted, had other opportunities that I could have jumped, and I chose not to. And I'm glad I did it because I did learn a lot. And so one thing I am slowly learning, and I'm not a patient person at all. Patience is not my strong suit whatsoever. But one thing I am learning very slowly is how to appreciate the process and the things that I'm learning while I'm checking off these milestones, as well as setting smaller goals and understanding what those smaller goals are so that I'm not disappointed when I don't get what I fantasized about. And I think that has been very fruitful for me over the past few months, is slowing down, understanding like, what am I gathering from this chapter of my life that's going to help me in the next.